My name is Rebecca, and I'm 26 years old. Every summer, my family takes our traditional trip to Martha's Vineyard, and I always look forward to reconnecting with everyone. This year felt different though. Something seemed off during our planning conversations, but I couldn't put my finger on it. When I arrived at the luxury resort and heard those devastating words from the hotel clerk, my world turned upside down completely. Before I tell you what happened next, please let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe because this story will show you how sometimes family can surprise you in the worst possible way. The Walker family had been making annual pilgrimages to Martha's Vineyard for as long as I could remember. These trips weren't just vacations, they were sacred traditions that defined who we were as a family. Every July, we'd pack our summer clothes, load up the cars, and head to the same picturesque island where generations of our family had created memories. My earliest recollections of these trips painted a picture of pure happiness. I remembered being 7 years old, building elaborate sandcastles with my younger sister Madison while our parents watched from beach chairs, their laughter mixing with the sound of crashing waves. Dad would take us sailing on his friend's yacht, teaching us how to read the wind and adjust the sails. Mom would organize elaborate beach picnics, complete with her famous potato salad and homemade lemonade that somehow tasted better when consumed with sand between our toes. Madison and I used to be inseparable during these trips. We'd spend hours collecting seashells, creating treasure maps, and pretending to be pirates exploring uncharted territories. Our parents, James and Catherine, seemed to live for these moments when their daughters were carefree and united in innocent adventure. Catherine had always been the family's master planner. She possessed an almost supernatural ability to coordinate complex travel arrangements, book the perfect accommodations, and create detailed itineraries that somehow managed to please everyone. Her organizational skills were legendary among our extended family, and she took immense pride in ensuring every detail was flawlessly executed. This year's trip came at a particularly crucial time in my life. I'd recently started a new position as a marketing coordinator at a prestigious firm in Boston, and the demanding schedule had consumed most of my energy over the past few months. Additionally, my relationship with my boyfriend of 2 years had ended rather messily just 6 weeks earlier, leaving me emotionally drained and questioning many aspects of my life. The idea of escaping to Martha's Vineyard with my family felt like exactly what I needed. I imagined long walks on the beach with Madison, heart-to-heart conversations that would help heal my recent wounds, and the comfort of being surrounded by people who loved me unconditionally. During the planning phase, our family group chat had been buzzing with activity for weeks. Madison was particularly excited about trying new restaurants, Dad wanted to book fishing charters, and Mom was researching spa treatments and cultural activities. When I offered to help with accommodation bookings or activity reservations, I was repeatedly told that everything was already handled. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart," Mom had texted back. "I've got everything under control. Just focus on your new job and getting yourself ready for a relaxing vacation." Her response felt caring and considerate at the time. I was grateful that my family understood how overwhelming my recent life changes had been and wanted to spare me additional stress. Looking back, I should have recognized the subtle shift in their communication patterns, but I was too trusting and too focused on my own challenges to notice the warning signs. The excitement built steadily as our departure date approached. I spent an entire weekend shopping for new summer clothes, carefully selecting outfits that would photograph well for social media and make me feel confident after my recent breakup. I researched the island's newest attractions, made lists of books I wanted to read on the beach, and even planned surprise activities I could organize for the family. Madison and I had been drifting apart somewhat over the past year due to our busy schedules, but I saw this trip as an opportunity to rebuild our close sisterly bond. I missed our late-night conversations and spontaneous adventures. I was genuinely excited about the prospect of spending quality time together without the distractions of work and daily responsibilities. The morning of departure dawned bright and beautiful. I woke up early, feeling more optimistic than I had in months. My apartment was filled with neatly packed luggage, carefully folded summer clothes, and the kind of anticipatory energy that only comes before a long-awaited vacation. Due to my work schedule, I needed to drive separately from the rest of my family. We'd arranged to meet at the resort, and I was actually looking forward to the solo drive. The 3-hour journey would give me time to decompress from my hectic work week and mentally prepare for quality family time. I loaded my car with enthusiasm, double-checking that I had everything needed for a perfect vacation. My trunk contained carefully selected outfits, beach accessories, books, and thoughtful gifts I'd purchased for each family member. The drive itself was pleasant, with perfect weather and light traffic that allowed me to arrive slightly ahead of schedule. However, the first small sign of trouble appeared during my journey. I'd tried calling Mom and Dad multiple times to confirm arrival logistics and coordinate our meeting, but my calls went straight to voicemail. I'd sent several text messages asking about check-in procedures and dinner plans, but received no responses. At the time, I assumed they were simply busy with their own travel preparations or dealing with poor cell phone reception. As I pulled into the resort's circular driveway, admiring the elegant architecture and perfectly manicured landscaping, I felt a surge of gratitude for my family's thoughtfulness in choosing such a beautiful location. I had no idea that my entire world was about to crumble in the most public and humiliating way possible. The Ocean View Resort exceeded even my highest expectations. As I stepped through the massive glass doors, I was immediately struck by the lobby's breathtaking elegance. Polished marble floors reflected the light from enormous crystal chandeliers, while floor-to-ceiling windows offered stunning views of the harbor beyond. Fresh flower arrangements filled the air with subtle fragrance, and the soft sounds of classical music created an atmosphere of refined luxury. I approached the mahogany reception desk with complete confidence, my excitement barely contained as I anticipated surprising my family who presumably hadn't arrived yet. The desk clerk, a professional-looking man in his early 30s with perfectly pressed uniform, greeted me with the kind of warm smile that expensive hotels train their staff to perfect. "Good evening, and welcome to the Ocean View Resort," he said cheerfully. "How may I assist you tonight?" "Hi there," I replied, practically beaming with happiness. "I'm checking in. The reservation should be under Walker." I watched as his fingers moved efficiently across the keyboard, fully expecting the smooth confirmation that would mark the official beginning of our family vacation. However, after several seconds of typing and scrolling, his expression began to shift from professional confidence to puzzled concern. "Let me try a different spelling," he murmured, more to himself than to me. His brow furrowed slightly as he continued searching through the reservation system. "Could it possibly be under a different name?" I suggested helpfully. "Maybe my father's name, James Walker, or my mother, Catherine Walker." The clerk's search continued for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 2 or 3 minutes. Behind me, I could sense other guests gathering in line, their patience beginning to wear thin as my simple check-in process dragged on unexpectedly. "I'm trying every possible variation," the clerk assured me, his professional demeanor remaining intact despite the obvious problem. "Could you provide me with a confirmation number or the dates of your reservation?" I fumbled through my purse, searching for any documentation related to our trip. The reality was beginning to sink in that I didn't actually have any confirmation numbers or reservation details because Mom had handled all the arrangements. My family had been so insistent about taking care of everything that I'd never thought to ask for backup documentation. "I don't have the confirmation number with me," I admitted, feeling the first flutter of genuine worry in my stomach. "My mother made all the arrangements, but I'm definitely supposed to be here. This is our annual family trip." The clerk's expression grew increasingly apologetic as his search continued. He checked under every possible spelling of our name, tried different date ranges and even consulted with a colleague who came over to offer assistance. The lobby's elegant atmosphere suddenly felt oppressive as I became aware of the growing line behind me and the curious glances from other guests. "Miss Walker," the clerk finally said, his voice gentle but devastating, "I sincerely apologize, but I cannot find your reservation anywhere in our system." The words hit me like a physical blow. My coffee mug, which I'd been holding throughout this increasingly surreal conversation, slipped from my suddenly numb fingers and crashed to the marble floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire lobby. The elegant porcelain shattered into dozens of pieces, creating a mess that perfectly mirrored the confusion in my mind. My immediate assumption was that this had to be some kind of misunderstanding. Hotels made mistakes all the time, reservation systems had glitches, and there were probably simple explanations for mix-ups like this. I quickly pulled out my phone to call Mom, certain that she'd be able to clear up this confusion within minutes. However, when I checked our family group chat for reservation details or confirmation numbers, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. The chat history, which had been filled with excited vacation planning discussions just days earlier, now showed a strange gap. Recent messages that I was certain I'd seen before seemed to be missing. "This doesn't make sense," I muttered, scrolling through my phone while hotel staff quietly cleaned up the broken mug around my feet. "I know we talked about this trip. I know the reservations were made." With growing desperation, I tried calling Mom's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Dad's phone did the same thing. Even Madison's number, which typically had excellent reception, seemed to be unreachable. The silence from my family was becoming as confusing as the missing reservation. "Ma'am," the desk clerk said gently, "is it possible that your family made reservations at a different hotel? Martha's Vineyard has several luxury resorts, and sometimes guests accidentally arrive at the wrong location." His suggestion offered a brief moment of hope, but I quickly dismissed it. Our family had been coming to this exact resort for years. The Ocean View was practically our home away from home, and there was absolutely no possibility that Mom would have booked us anywhere else. That's when another thought occurred to me, one that sent a chill down my spine. If the reservation system showed no record of me, but my family was definitely planning to be here, then where exactly were they? "Could you check if other members of my family have already checked in?" I asked, my voice beginning to shake slightly. "James and Catherine Walker and Madison Walker?" The clerk's fingers flew across the keyboard once again, and this time his search yielded immediate results. His expression shifted to one of confusion mixed with sympathy as he looked back at me. "Yes," he said carefully, "I show that the Walker family checked in approximately 1 hour ago. They're registered in our presidential suite." The news that my family was already here, already settled in their room, already beginning their vacation without me, hit harder than the missing reservation had. Why hadn't they waited for me? Why hadn't they called to make sure I'd arrived safely? And most importantly, why wasn't my name included in their reservation? I stood in that elegant lobby, surrounded by the debris of my shattered coffee mug and the growing concern of hotel staff, feeling more alone and confused than I'd ever felt in my entire life. My luggage sat beside me like a monument to my misplaced expectations, and I realized that I had absolutely no idea what to do next. The worst part was the growing certainty that this wasn't a mistake or an accident. Something was very, very wrong, and I was about to discover just how wrong things could get. Armed with the knowledge that my family was indeed at the resort and had been here for over an hour, I made the decision to find them and get to the bottom of this increasingly bizarre situation. The hotel staff offered to hold my luggage while I located my family, and I gratefully accepted their assistance, though I could see the sympathy in their eyes as they processed what was happening. I wandered through the resort's beautifully appointed corridors, checking the various restaurants, bars, and common areas where my family might be relaxing after their journey. The Ocean View Resort was designed like a small village, with multiple buildings connected by covered walkways and lush gardens, so finding specific guests could be challenging without knowing exactly where to look. After 20 minutes of searching, I finally spotted them at the poolside restaurant, seated at a prime table overlooking the water. The scene before me was picture perfect. Mom and Dad were enjoying what appeared to be cocktails while Madison lounged in a designer sundress, her perfectly styled hair catching the late afternoon sunlight. They looked relaxed, content, and completely at ease in a way that suggested they'd been settled in for quite some time. What struck me most was how normal they appeared. This wasn't a family frantically searching for a missing daughter or desperately trying to solve a reservation crisis. They looked like people who were exactly where they expected to be, doing exactly what they'd planned to do. I approached their table with my best attempt at a cheerful smile, though I could feel the strain around my eyes as I tried to mask my growing confusion and concern. "There you are," I called out as I got closer. "I've been looking everywhere for you." The reaction from my family was immediate and strange. Dad glanced up from his drink, made brief eye contact with me, then quickly looked away toward the harbor as if something fascinating had suddenly captured his attention. Mom's hand went immediately to the jewelry at her throat, a nervous habit I'd seen countless times when she was uncomfortable, and she began fidgeting with her necklace without meeting my gaze. Madison's response was the most unsettling. She looked directly at me, but her expression was cold and distant, completely lacking the warmth and excitement I'd expected for our reunion. Her designer sunglasses were positioned strategically to hide her eyes, and her body language suggested irritation rather than happiness at seeing me. "Oh," Madison said flatly, her tone carrying none of the enthusiasm typical of our family gatherings. "You're here." The lukewarm greeting felt like a slap. Where was the excited hug, the rapid fire catching up, the immediate inclusion in their conversation? Instead, I felt like an unwelcome interruption to their peaceful afternoon. "Of course I'm here," I replied, my forced cheerfulness beginning to crack slightly. "We've been planning this trip for months, but I'm having the strangest problem with the hotel reservation. They can't find my name anywhere in the system." I launched into an explanation of my experience at the front desk, expecting immediate concern and offers to help solve the problem. Instead, I was met with a silence so profound it felt deafening. Mom continued fidgeting with her necklace, Dad studied his drink as if it contained the secrets of the universe, and Madison maintained her cool, distant expression. "That's weird," Madison finally said, her voice completely devoid of surprise or concern. "Maybe you should call the hotel you actually booked." Her suggestion was delivered with a subtle edge that I couldn't quite interpret. It felt dismissive, almost mocking, but surely I was misreading the situation. This was my sister, my family, the people who loved me most in the world. "No, no," I insisted, my desperation beginning to show. "It's definitely this hotel. We always stay at the Ocean View. The clerk confirmed that you all checked in an hour ago, but somehow my name isn't on the reservation." The family exchanged glances that I couldn't decipher, a silent communication that clearly excluded me. It was as if they were having an entire conversation with their eyes while I stood there feeling increasingly foolish and unwanted. "Look," I continued, my voice taking on a pleading quality that I hated hearing, "I know there must be some kind of mistake. Maybe we can just add me to your reservation. Or I could get my own room nearby. I'm sure we can figure this out." Dad finally spoke, though he still wouldn't look directly at me. "Rebecca, the hotel mentioned they're completely booked for the weekend. Some kind of special event happening on the island." His response felt rehearsed, as if he'd been preparing this explanation for some time. The casualness of his tone suggested that my accommodation crisis wasn't particularly urgent or concerning to him. "But you all have rooms," I pointed out, my confusion growing by the minute. "Surely there's space for one more person. We're family." Actually, Mom finally contributed to the conversation, her voice tight and uncomfortable. "We only booked the one suite. It's really just designed for 4 people. The mathematical impossibility of her statement hit me immediately. There were 4 of us: Mom, Dad, Madison, and me. If the suite accommodated 4 people, then why was I the one without a place to stay? "I don't understand," I said, my voice beginning to shake. "If there's room for 4 people and there are 4 of us, then why isn't there space for me?" The silence that followed my question was the most uncomfortable moment of my entire life. It stretched on for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, during which I watched my family struggle to avoid eye contact while clearly wishing I would simply disappear. Madison finally broke the silence with words that would change everything between us forever. "Rebecca," she said, her voice taking on the patient tone typically reserved for explaining obvious things to confused children, "there have been some changes in the family dynamic lately. We thought it might be better if this trip focused on people who really want to be together." The cruelty of her words was matched only by their calculated delivery. This wasn't an emotional outburst or a moment of poor judgment. This was a deliberately planned exclusion, delivered with the kind of cold precision that could only come from extensive preparation. "What are you talking about?" I asked, though a horrible understanding was beginning to dawn. "I want to be here. I've been looking forward to this trip for months." "Have you really?" Madison challenged, removing her sunglasses to look directly at me for the first time. "Because it seems like you've been pretty focused on your own problems lately. Your job, your breakup, your whole victim mentality about everything that's happened to you. Her words felt like physical blows, each accusation hitting me with devastating accuracy while revealing a perspective of me that I'd never realized existed. In Madison's eyes, I wasn't a beloved sister going through a difficult period who deserved family support. I was a burden, a source of drama, someone whose presence would diminish their vacation experience. The worst part was watching Mom and Dad's continued silence. Their refusal to defend me or correct Madison's harsh assessment felt like the ultimate betrayal. These were the people who had raised me, who had supposedly loved me unconditionally, and they were allowing my sister to verbally destroy me without saying a single word in my defense. "I can't believe this is happening," I whispered, more to myself than to them. "You're my family." "Yes," Madison replied coldly, "and family means being honest with each other. The honest truth is that we all thought this vacation would be more peaceful without you." The revelation that this exclusion had been a group decision, something they'd all discussed and agreed upon behind my back, was the final piece of my heart breaking completely. What happened next will be burned into my memory forever. Madison stood up from her chair with the kind of dramatic flair she'd perfected during her college theater days, and her voice carried across the restaurant as she delivered the most devastating blow of my entire life. "I only made reservations for our real family," she announced loudly, her words projecting with theatrical precision that ensured every nearby table could hear our private humiliation. The poolside restaurant, which had been filled with a gentle murmur of vacation conversations and clinking glasses, fell into an uncomfortable silence. I could feel the eyes of strangers turning toward our table, their curiosity piqued by the obvious family drama unfolding before them. The elegant atmosphere that had seemed so welcoming just hours earlier now felt like a spotlight illuminating my public shame. My body's physical response to Madison's cruelty was immediate and overwhelming. My hands began trembling uncontrollably, my chest tightened until breathing became difficult, and I felt a cold sensation spreading through my limbs as if my blood had literally turned to ice. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore, it was a visceral, physical experience that made me feel like I might collapse right there on the restaurant's pristine deck. "Madison," I managed to whisper, though my voice came out as barely more than a croak. "How can you say that? What do you mean real family?" But Madison wasn't finished. Having captured the attention of our audience, she seemed energized by the drama she was creating. Her voice took on the kind of righteous indignation typically reserved for major moral victories. "I mean people who don't spend every family gathering complaining about their problems," she continued, her words sharp enough to cut glass. "People who don't make everything about themselves. People who actually contribute something positive instead of just taking all the time." Each accusation felt like a dagger being twisted deeper into my chest. This wasn't just about the hotel reservation anymore. This was Madison airing grievances that she'd apparently been harboring for years while I remained completely oblivious to her resentment. "Your job promotion," she continued relentlessly. "All you do is brag about how successful you are, making the rest of us feel small. Your relationship drama? We're all tired of hearing about poor Rebecca and her dating disasters. You think you're better than everyone else, but you're just selfish and exhausting to be around." I looked desperately toward my parents, silently begging them to intervene, to defend me, to restore some sanity to this nightmare scenario. But James and Catherine had transformed into statues, their faces carefully blank as they stared at various points around the restaurant while pretending this devastating character assassination wasn't happening at their table. "Mom," I pleaded, my voice breaking completely. "Dad, please tell me this isn't real. Please tell me this is some kind of horrible mistake." Catherine's response was to take a large sip of her cocktail while avoiding my gaze entirely. James cleared his throat uncomfortably but said nothing. Their silence wasn't just disappointing. It was confirmation that Madison's words represented their shared feelings about me. "I need to understand this," I said, my desperation growing with each passing second. "What specifically have I done? When did I make you all feel this way? Why didn't anyone talk to me about these problems?" Madison's laugh was bitter and theatrical. "Talk to you? Rebecca, we've tried. But you're so wrapped up in your own little world that you never listen. Remember Christmas when you spent the entire dinner talking about your work projects? Remember Mom's birthday when you showed up late because of some meeting and then complained about how stressed you were?" As Madison recounted these incidents, I searched my memory for context that might explain or justify her perspective. Yes, I had been excited about my career successes. Yes, I had been dealing with relationship problems that sometimes dominated conversations. But wasn't that what families were for? Support during difficult times? Celebrating achievements together? "I thought you were proud of my accomplishments," I said weakly. "I thought you wanted to hear about my life." "We wanted to hear about your life when it included other people," James finally spoke, though his words felt rehearsed and uncomfortable. "Lately, it's just been all about Rebecca's problems, Rebecca's successes, Rebecca's needs. There's no room for anyone else." The accusation of selfishness stung particularly deeply because it contained just enough truth to make me question everything about myself. Had I really been so self-absorbed? Had my enthusiasm about work achievements come across as bragging? Had my requests for emotional support during my breakup been excessive? "But we're family," I repeated, as if saying it enough times might restore the unconditional love I'd always believed existed between us. "Families support each other through good times and bad times." "Real families do," Madison agreed, her emphasis on the word real cutting through me like a knife. "But real family members also consider other people's feelings. They don't expect everyone else to revolve around their drama. The revelation that my family's definition of real somehow excluded me was perhaps the most devastating aspect of this entire confrontation. I'd grown up believing that family bonds were unbreakable, that blood relationships created unconditional love and support. Instead, I was discovering that my place in this family was conditional, based on my behavior meeting standards that had never been clearly communicated. "So you planned this," I said, the full scope of their betrayal finally becoming clear. "You had family meetings about excluding me. You made decisions about me behind my back. You discussed my shortcomings and decided I didn't deserve to be here. We thought it would be better for everyone." Catherine finally contributed, her voice so quiet I could barely hear her over the restaurant's background noise. "We thought maybe some time apart would help you reflect on your behavior." The clinical coldness of her explanation made this feel less like a family conflict and more like an intervention for someone with a serious character flaw. The people who had raised me, who had supposedly loved me unconditionally, had conducted a trial in my absence and found me guilty of being insufficiently considerate of their needs. "And you didn't think to include me in this discussion?" I asked. "You didn't think I deserved a chance to defend myself or understand your concerns? What would have been the point?" Madison shrugged. "You would have just made it all about your feelings again, convinced us that we were wrong, and nothing would have changed." The hopelessness in her response suggested that she'd already written me off completely. In Madison's mind, I was apparently incapable of growth, change, or a genuine consideration for others. This wasn't a temporary punishment or a wake-up call, it was a permanent exclusion based on character flaws she considered irreparable. As I stood there processing the enormity of their collective rejection, I became aware that our entire conversation had been witnessed by dozens of other hotel guests. The elegant poolside restaurant had become an amphitheater for my public humiliation, and I could see people whispering among themselves, pointing discreetly in our direction, and capturing this moment that would probably become fodder for their own vacation stories. The hotel staff, professionally trained to handle all kinds of guest situations, were clearly struggling with how to respond to this family crisis. I could see waiters hovering at the edges of the scene, uncertain whether to intervene or allow this drama to continue playing out in their usually peaceful establishment. This was the moment when everything I'd believed about love, family, and my place in the world crumbled completely. Standing there in that beautiful restaurant, surrounded by strangers witnessing my deepest humiliation, I realized that the people I'd trusted most had revealed themselves to be capable of a cruelty I'd never imagined possible. Standing there amid the wreckage of everything I'd believed about my family, something profound shifted inside me. The tears that had been threatening to fall suddenly stopped, replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like awakening from a long, confusing dream. For the first time in this entire nightmare scenario, I wasn't focused on convincing them to love me or begging for inclusion. Instead, I was seeing the situation with startling objectivity. The people sitting at this table weren't the loving family I'd idealized in my memory. They were individuals capable of orchestrating deliberate cruelty, planning humiliation, and executing emotional warfare with calculated precision. The Madison who had spent years as my closest confidant had revealed herself to be someone who could deliver public character assassination without a trace of remorse. The parents who had raised me to believe in unconditional love had demonstrated that their affection came with terms and conditions I'd never been informed about. "You know what?" I said, my voice steadied for the first time since this conversation began. "You're absolutely right." My family's expressions shifted from smug satisfaction to confusion as they processed my unexpected response. They'd clearly been prepared for more tears, more begging, more desperate attempts to convince them of my worth. They hadn't expected calm agreement. "I have been selfish," I continued, feeling a strange sense of liberation as I spoke. I was selfish enough to believe that family meant mutual support. I was selfish enough to think that celebrating successes and seeking comfort during failures was what people who love each other do for one another. I was selfish enough to assume that honesty and communication could solve problems instead of secret meetings and public humiliation. Madison's confident expression was beginning to falter as she realized this conversation wasn't going according to her script. The restaurant audience that had been hanging on every word of our drama was now witnessing something unexpected, the supposed victim taking control of the narrative. "But here's what I'm not selfish enough to do," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I'm not selfish enough to sit here and beg people who don't want me to pretend they do. I'm not selfish enough to waste another minute trying to convince you that I deserve basic human decency. And, I'm definitely not selfish enough to ruin my vacation by spending it with people who think so little of me. The power by spending it with people who think so little of me." The power dynamic at the table had completely reversed. Instead of a broken woman pleading for acceptance, I had become someone making a dignified exit from an unworthy situation. The transformation was as surprising to me as it clearly was to them. I turned away from their shocked faces and walked calmly toward the restaurant's exit, leaving them to process what had just happened. Behind me, I could hear Madison calling my name, but her voice carried a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there during her earlier attacks. For the first time, she seemed to realize that her cruelty might have consequences she hadn't anticipated. My return journey to the hotel lobby felt completely different from my earlier desperate search for answers. This time, I walked with purpose and determination, my head high despite the curious glances from other guests who had clearly heard about the poolside drama. Instead of feeling ashamed, I felt proud of myself for refusing to accept treatment that was beneath my dignity. At the concierge desk, I approached a distinguished-looking woman who radiated the kind of professional competence that suggested she could solve any problem. "Good evening," I said with genuine warmth. I need your help finding alternative accommodations for tonight. Somewhere elegant, peaceful and as far away from my family as possible. The concierge, whose nameplate identified her as Elena Rodriguez, smiled with the kind of understanding that suggested she'd witnessed the restaurant scene and admired my handling of it. I have exactly what you need, Elena said, her fingers flying across her computer keyboard. The Lighthouse Inn just had a cancellation in their premium oceanfront suite. It's a boutique property about 15 minutes from here, much more intimate and exclusive than our resort. As Elena provided details about the Lighthouse Inn, I realized that this unexpected change might actually be the best thing that could have happened. Instead of being trapped in close quarters with people who clearly resented my presence, I would have complete freedom to create my own vacation experience. That sounds perfect, I told Elena. Please book it for me. While Elena arranged the reservation, I pulled out my phone and began making additional calls. My marketing background had taught me the value of networking, and I suddenly remembered that my college roommate Diana worked for a luxury travel company that specialized in Martha's Vineyard experiences. Diana, I said when she answered, this is going to sound crazy, but I'm on the island right now, and I need your help planning the most amazing solo vacation ever. Diana's enthusiasm was immediate and infectious. Within minutes, she was arranging spa treatments, exclusive restaurant reservations, and private tours that would showcase the island's hidden gems. Her excitement about helping me create a luxury experience was such a stark contrast to my family's rejection that I almost started crying again, but this time from gratitude rather than pain. Rebecca, this is going to be incredible, Diana assured me. I'm setting you up with experiences your family could never access. By tomorrow night, you're going to be living better than royalty. As I listened to Diana enumerate the exclusive opportunities she was arranging, I began to understand that my family's rejection had actually liberated me from their limitations. Instead of being constrained by group decisions and compromise, I could pursue exactly the experiences that interested me most. My phone began buzzing with social media notifications, and I realized that other guests had been posting about the restaurant drama. However, instead of humiliating gossip, most of the posts were expressing admiration for my dignified response to an obviously unfair situation. Strangers were commenting about my grace under pressure and criticizing my family's public cruelty. One post from a woman named Sarah mentioned that she'd watched the entire scene and wanted to buy me a drink to celebrate my self-respect. Another guest had commented that my family clearly didn't deserve someone with my class and dignity. The support from complete strangers was providing exactly the validation that my own family had withheld. Elena finished my reservation arrangements and handed me a beautiful folder containing all the details for my new accommodation. Your driver will be here in 20 minutes, she said. And Miss Walker, what you did back there took real courage. Your family doesn't know what they've lost. As I waited for my transportation, I began documenting this entire experience through carefully crafted social media posts. My marketing instincts told me that this story had the power to resonate with people who had experienced similar family betrayals, and I wanted to share my journey from devastation to empowerment. The responses to my posts were immediate and overwhelming. Friends, colleagues, and even distant acquaintances began reaching out with support, encouragement, and their own stories of overcoming family toxicity. The online community I was building in real time was providing more genuine care and concern than my biological family had shown. When my driver arrived, I walked toward the luxury car with my head high and my spirits soaring. In the space of just a few hours, I had transformed from a rejected family member into an independent woman creating her own path. The liberation was intoxicating, and I couldn't wait to see what adventures awaited me at my new destination. 3 days into my solo adventure, I had completely transformed my Martha's Vineyard experience into something extraordinary. The Lighthouse Inn had exceeded every expectation, providing not just luxury accommodations but a level of personalized service that made me feel genuinely valued as a guest. My oceanfront suite offered breathtaking sunrise views, and I developed a morning routine of coffee on the private balcony while planning each day's adventures. Diana's network had opened doors I never knew existed. I'd enjoyed private wine tastings at exclusive vineyards, taken sailing lessons with a former Olympic competitor, and experienced spa treatments that had helped heal both my body and spirit. More importantly, I'd connected with fascinating people who appreciated my company and treated me with the respect my family had denied me. On Thursday evening, I was dining at Aqua, the island's most prestigious restaurant, which typically required reservations months in advance. Diana had secured me a prime table through her industry connections, and I was enjoying a spectacular seafood tasting menu while watching the sunset paint the harbor in brilliant colors. The restaurant's atmosphere was sophisticated and intimate, attracting successful professionals, celebrities, and other discerning travelers who appreciated fine dining and elegant ambiance. I dressed in a flowing emerald dress that made me feel confident and beautiful, and I was genuinely enjoying the peaceful solitude of my meal. Halfway through dinner, a distinguished gentleman at the adjacent table introduced himself as Robert Chin, the owner of several boutique hotels throughout New England. Our conversation began with compliments about my choice of wine and evolved into a fascinating discussion about hospitality, marketing, and business development. You have excellent insights about customer experience, Robert said as our conversation continued. Have you ever considered working in the hospitality industry? Before I could respond, I noticed a familiar commotion near the restaurant's entrance. My family had arrived for dinner, clearly hoping to experience the same level of luxury I was enjoying. However, their approach to the hostess suggested they didn't have reservations, and their frustrated conversation indicated they were being turned away. The irony was delicious. While they had excluded me from their carefully planned vacation, I was dining at the island's most exclusive establishment with interesting new acquaintances who valued my company. "Excuse me for just a moment," I told Robert, rising from my table with the confidence that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong. I approached the hostess station where my family was arguing with the staff about availability. Madison was using her most entitled voice, demanding to speak with managers and threatening to leave negative reviews if they couldn't accommodate her party immediately. "Good evening," I said pleasantly, addressing the hostess while completely ignoring my family's shocked expressions. "Is there a problem here?" The hostess, recognizing me as a valued guest who had been gracious and appreciative throughout my stay, smiled warmly. "Miss Walker, your friends were hoping for a table, but, unfortunately, we're completely booked tonight." "Friends?" I repeated, allowing a note of confusion to enter my voice. "I'm sorry, but I don't know these people." The impact of my words on my family was immediate and devastating. Madison's face went white, James began sputtering protestations, and Catherine looked like she might faint. They'd clearly expected me to either slink away in embarrassment or attempt some kind of reconciliation. They hadn't prepared for complete dismissal. "Actually," I continued, turning to address them directly for the first time, "I do recognize you. You're the people who publicly humiliated me 3 days ago because you thought I was selfish and unworthy of basic family courtesy." My voice remained calm and pleasant, but every word carried the weight of absolute certainty. I wasn't emotional or vindictive. I was simply stating facts in the same tone I might use to describe the weather. "Rebecca," Madison started, her voice lacking its earlier confidence, "we were hoping we could talk." "About what?" I interrupted gently. "About how you spent weeks planning my exclusion. About how you allowed me to travel here believing I was wanted. About how you chose public humiliation over private conversation. I'm not sure what we could possibly have to discuss." By this point, other restaurant patrons were beginning to notice our conversation. Unlike the poolside scene where I'd been the victim of their attack, this time I was clearly in control while they scrambled for some way to regain their footing. "We made a mistake," James said quietly, his earlier confidence completely absent. "We realize now that we handled things poorly." "You didn't handle things poorly," I corrected him. "You revealed your true character. The only mistake was mine, in believing that people who could treat family members so cruelly were actually worth my time and emotional energy." Robert had risen from our table and approached our group, his presence adding another layer of sophistication to the scene. "Rebecca," he said, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder, "is everything all right here?" "Everything is perfect," I assured him, maintaining my pleasant tone while my family processed the fact that I'd clearly made impressive new connections during my solo vacation. These people were just leaving. The power dynamic had completely reversed from our poolside confrontation. Instead of begging for their acceptance, I was dismissing them from my presence. Instead of being isolated and humiliated, I was supported by new friends who treated me with genuine respect. "Rebecca, please," Catherine spoke for the first time, her voice shaking with emotion. "We're your family. We love you." "No," I replied with absolute certainty. "People who love me don't plan elaborate schemes to exclude and humiliate me. People who love me don't require me to prove my worth through perfect behavior. People who love me celebrate my successes instead of resenting them." Madison made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "You're being dramatic," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "We just thought you could treat me like garbage and I'd be so grateful for any scraps of attention that I'd accept whatever crumbs of affection you decided to offer," I finished for her. "You thought wrong." The hostess, who had been listening to this exchange with growing admiration for my composure, finally spoke. "I'm sorry, but if you don't have reservations, I'll need to ask you to leave so that our guests can enjoy their dining experience." As my family was escorted toward the exit, I returned to my table feeling lighter and more confident than I had in years. Robert looked at me with newfound respect, and our conversation resumed with even greater depth and enthusiasm. "That was handled beautifully," he said. "You have remarkable composure under pressure." "Thank you," I replied, meaning it completely. "I've learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to accept treatment that's beneath your dignity." The rest of our dinner conversation flowed, even more naturally, and, by dessert, Robert had offered me a position as marketing director for his hotel group. The opportunity represented not just career advancement, but validation that my professional skills were valuable and appreciated by people who mattered. As I walked back to the lighthouse in that evening, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed in just a few days. My family's rejection, which had initially felt like the end of the world, had actually liberated me to discover my own strength, build meaningful new relationships, and create opportunities one never would have pursued while constrained by their limitations. 6 months after that transformative week on Martha's Vineyard, I found myself sitting in my new corner office overlooking Boston Harbor, preparing for a presentation that would introduce revolutionary customer experience strategies to Robert's hotel group. The career opportunity that had emerged from that painful family confrontation had evolved into the most fulfilling professional challenge of my life. My journey toward healing hadn't been simple or linear. The weeks following my return from the island brought a complex mixture of emotions that required professional guidance to navigate effectively. I'd found an excellent therapist, Dr. Amanda Foster, who specialized in family trauma and helped me understand the patterns of conditional love and emotional manipulation that had shaped my relationships for years. Through therapy, I discovered that my family's treatment of me hadn't emerged suddenly during that vacation. Instead, Dr. Foster helped me recognize subtle patterns of favoritism, criticism, and emotional withholding that had existed throughout my childhood but had been so normalized that I'd never questioned them. My recent success and independence had apparently threatened the family dynamic in ways that triggered their most defensive behaviors. Healthy families celebrate each member's growth and achievements, Dr. Foster had explained during one particularly enlightening session. Dysfunctional families often feel threatened by one member's success because it challenges their established roles and power structures. The healing process involved grieving not just the family I'd lost, but the family I'd never actually had. The unconditional love I'd believed existed had been largely a projection of my own hopes rather than reality. This realization was painful but ultimately liberating, freeing me from the exhausting effort of trying to earn love that was apparently unavailable. My chosen family began forming naturally around people who appreciated my authentic self. Diana became not just a professional connection, but one of my closest friends, someone who consistently demonstrated the loyalty and support I'd craved from my biological family. Robert's mentorship extended beyond professional guidance into genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared values. I'd also reconnected with college friends who had always valued my enthusiasm and drive. Sarah Murphy, my former roommate who now lived in San Francisco, flew to Boston for a weekend visit and reminded me of the person I'd been before family criticism had made me second-guess every aspect of my personality. "You were always the most generous person I knew," Sarah said during our reunion dinner. "You celebrated everyone's successes like they were your own, and you never made anyone feel small for their struggles. That family of yours was lucky to have you, and they were too stupid to appreciate it." Her words carried the weight of someone who had known me during my formative years, before family dynamics had convinced me that my natural enthusiasm and ambition were character flaws rather than strengths. The professional growth that emerged from my new position exceeded every expectation. Robert's hotel group valued innovative thinking and creative problem-solving qualities that my previous environments had sometimes discouraged. My marketing campaigns consistently exceeded performance targets, and my team respected my leadership style because it emphasized collaboration rather than competition. Meanwhile, my family's attempts at reconciliation had been persistent, but ultimately hollow. Madison sent periodic text messages that always began with apologies but quickly devolved into justifications for their behavior and requests for me to understand their perspective. James called monthly, usually after Catherine prompted him, but his conversations felt scripted and uncomfortable, lacking any genuine acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused. Catherine's approach was perhaps the most manipulative. She sent cards for every holiday and birthday, each containing lengthy handwritten notes about family memories and expressions of love that carefully avoided any actual accountability for their actions. Her messages always ended with invitations to come home and put this misunderstanding behind us, as if my exclusion and public humiliation had been minor miscommunications rather than deliberate cruelty. I responded to their overtures with polite but firm boundaries. I wasn't cruel or vindictive, but I also wasn't willing to pretend that superficial apologies could repair fundamental trust that had been shattered. Real reconciliation would require genuine acknowledgement of harm caused, meaningful changes in behavior, and demonstrated consistency over time. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, Dr. Foster had taught me. And it certainly doesn't mean accepting continued mistreatment or pretending that serious harm didn't occur. My new annual tradition became solo travel adventures that prioritized my own interests and well-being. Instead of trying to navigate family dynamics and accommodate other people's preferences, I explored destinations that fascinated me and engaged in activities that brought me genuine joy. Last month's trip to Iceland had been particularly transformative. The raw beauty of the landscape, the warmth of the local people, and the complete freedom to follow my own curiosity had reinforced my understanding that happiness didn't require other people's approval or participation. During the Northern Lights tour, I'd met Trevor, a wildlife photographer from New Zealand who shared my love of adventure and appreciated my independence. Our connection felt natural and uncomplicated, built on mutual respect rather than obligation or expectation. For the first time in years, I was exploring a romantic relationship with someone who celebrated my strengths rather than trying to diminish them. The wisdom I'd gained from that painful Martha's Vineyard experience had fundamentally changed how I approached all relationships. I no longer accepted treatment that diminished my self-worth, regardless of the source. I'd learned to recognize red flags that indicated conditional love, emotional manipulation, or attempts to make me smaller to accommodate other people's insecurities. Most importantly, I discovered that my worth wasn't determined by other people's ability to appreciate me. My value existed independently of external validation, and protecting that understanding had become my most important responsibility. As I prepared for today's presentation, I reflected on how that hotel lobby humiliation had become the catalyst for the most positive changes in my life. Sometimes the most painful experiences reveal truths that transform everything, forcing us to choose between accepting unacceptable treatment or demanding the respect we deserve. That hotel lobby humiliation became the moment I finally learned to put myself first, and it changed everything. The family that couldn't appreciate me had been replaced by chosen relationships built on genuine mutual respect, and the career limitations I'd accepted had been shattered by environments that valued my authentic contributions. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who didn't treat you with respect? How did you find the courage to choose your own well-being over keeping peace with people who diminished you? Share your stories in the comments below because your experiences might help someone else find their own strength. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, Subscribe for more real-life stories about finding courage in difficult situations, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better treatment than they're accepting. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept love that comes with conditions that diminish your worth.